Hello everyone and welcome to the Allplan Basis course for students. My name is Jacob Martin and I'm your instructor for today. I want to give you in the first part a very quick overview over 2D drawings and the general settings and overlay in Allplan. So let's start right off with the startup window. So as soon as you started Allplan, you can see that this kind of startup menu shows up. On the left side, we have three big buttons, basically new, open, and copy. And these kinds of buttons allows us to create a new project or open an existing project, or for example, use a new project as a copy. On the right side, we have recent projects that I opened up earlier and worked on earlier. So you could quickly access them via this kind of menu with a double click. We also have different kinds of buttons, for example, for the official Allplan website, Facebook fan page, and the YouTube channel. So if we want to start up, we should click on this button, New Project, with a left click. As soon as we do that, a new menu pops up. We have new project, specify the project name. So let's basically go ahead and specify a project name. So for example, Allplan Basis Course 1. So you can choose any name you like. You should choose a name that lets you easily identify these kinds of project. So we also, in the next menu, we can basically choose the location, and we have three different options. For example, we have localhost, Bimplus, and find. So let's go quickly through these kinds of options. So the first, localhost, is basically everything is stored related to the project, of course. Everything is stored in a default folder. So the predefined folder that you basically created when you installed Allplan will be used if you use localhost, and everything will be stored in there. The next option, Bimplus, basically creates a connectivity to the common data environment Bimplus, which is also part of the Nemetschek group. This common data environment basically allows you to easily upload and share files and data you created within Allplan and other software. So this is a common data environment that basically let you easily work with others. So this is what Bimplus is all about. And we also have the third option, which is a newer option, which says find. So I can quickly click on that. So you can basically choose a different kind of folder for the project. But we don't need it right now. For our project, it's perfectly fine if we just set it to localhost. The next settings that we can access here, team and Bimplus model name, are basically only used for Bimplus, so we don't need it right now. And we also have the country-specific templates that come within your installation. So we have Germany. And on my PC, only Germany is installed. I only have the German installation, but there are different kinds of country-specific templates for all parts of the world, depending on where you are right now. And even further, we also have no project template and other presets that are here in German, besides Hello Allplan, which is also a different kind of story. But for our project, what I want to show you, we can easily choose no project template. And please take care that you basically mark it as just as I did. So do not choose something like this, Hello Allplan. As soon as this is marked, we could click on Fertigstellen, which is basically finish, the German term for finish. We want to go to no project template. And this is important. So please mark no project template and click on continue down here. Another menu shows up. It's basically new project, additional settings. So we have the path settings, and these kind of path settings are kind of important. We have, for example, pen and line definitions, fonts, patterns, hatching styles, area styles, and all these settings are set to project. So we basically have two kinds of options. We have office and project. And as long as you want to store everything project related in the predefined project folder, you can basically choose project. And this is what we are going to do here. If you're working in an office and have office standards that are predefined, you could basically choose office, and Allplan will access these kinds of presets. But we don't need it right now, so please set it to project. We also have this kind of button. We could basically access different kinds of definitions from other projects, but we don't need it right now. We also have a very interesting setting down here, which is set attribute set template. And this is currently set to IFC common. So let's check that one out. So we have basically IFC common in the drop-down menu. We have Bimplus and we have none. So basically IFC, and I think you already know it, is the IFC Foundation classes. And IFC common is basically the standardized preset that comes with the IFC standard. We could also set this to Bimplus. There is basically some attributes sets that are added to our objects that are related to Bimplus. We don't need it right now, and we have none. I would highly suggest that you leave it to IFC common. We also have different kind of catalogs, urban planning symbols. We don't need it right now, so we basically don't need to change anything. In the normal installation, in the student installation, you're not able to basically change the setting anyway. We have offset coordinates, which are kind of interesting if we are working with very big coordinates. We also have the geometry settings. So for example, if we want to set a project angle, that basically allows us to rotate the plan view, we could set that one here. And we also have the default reference scale, which is set to 50. Then we have country settings, country Germany. Again, in my installation, there's only the German preset installed, so we can change that if we don't need to. And of course, the Office resource path, which is set to the Office standard folder. So this is perfectly fine. We also have the button down here, which basically is the German term Fertigstellen, which says finish. So we can click on this kind of button down here. So as soon as we basically created the project and predefined the project, we are now able to take a look over the overview and the workspace in Allplan. So let me give you a very quick overview. So the most important menu that basically contains most of the functions from Allplan is up here. And this one is called actionbar. And the actionbar has different roles. And I would advise you, if you're first using Allplan, that you go ahead to the top left corner and basically click on this kind of drop-down menu to change the roles of the action bar. The first one is architecture. Then we have settings for engineering, surroundings, precast elements, road constructions, all kinds of different stuff. So I would change that quickly to engineering. And many of you may seem to be confused right now because I'm changing that. And basically my menus look very different from yours because I have a lot of small symbols that you can see here, but I can change that easily if I do a double click down here, for example, on this kind of menu to components. And I can basically change the view of this kind of menu. And I could change the view of every kind of menu that is in the action bar itself. So I can expand it or invert it. So this is basically what this is all about. So please don't get confused if you have big symbols and I have small symbols. The functionality doesn't change at all. So if I have the big symbols up here and I basically open the drop-down menu, I have wall, freeform wall, profile wall, stuff like that. If I do a double click on that, I also have sub-menus in wall itself. But for example, plumbing components and upstands and stuff like that are basically already expanded. So the functionality doesn't change at all. So you can basically choose what fits best to your liking. So if you're changing this kind of view, please take care that depending on the resolution of your screen, it can happen that on the right side, you don't have any space left. So you can basically see the space here. And if you expand your menus, you can basically see that this basically goes to the right, to the right, to the right. And as soon as it basically touches the edge of your screen, it won't expand any further. So you have to take care if you're working with a small resolution display. So let's talk a little bit more about the action bar. So on the left side, we learned that we have different kind of roles. So architecture, engineering, stuff like that. And as soon as we change it, the action bar changes dynamically. Let's go to draft, for example. We have on the right side 2D objects, 2D areas, grid instances, and stuff like that. And these kinds of menus allows us to access different kinds of functions that Allplan basically supports. But that's not all. We also have the labels up here. We have, for example, design, modeling, label, user-defined object, and that goes even further. And you have to take in mind that also these kinds of labels change as soon as you change your role. So if I go ahead, for example, to architecture, I can see the label elements, finish, modeling, label, design, stuff like that. And every kind of label contains different functions and different menus. So you have to keep in mind that not only the role has to be changed, also the label has to be changed. And then you're able to access these different kinds of menus. Modeling, for example, we have 3D objects. And this kind of menu and action bar contains stuff like 3D line, box, 3D surface, and so on and so on. A very important information I also want to provide to you is that the action bar has two different parts. So on the left side, for example, we can see 3D objects, Boolean operators, update. And these kinds of menus have this bluish grayish background. On the right side, we have a light gray background for quick access, change, edit, measure, annotations, attributes, filter, work environment, and stuff like that. And you probably already saw it. As soon as I change the menus and the labels, the right side will always stay the same. So basically quick access, change, edit, and so on, it will always be the same. It doesn't depend on which role you are or which label you are in, besides the layout editor, but we will talk about that later. So the right side basically never changes, and the left side changes always depending on your setting of your role and your label. So this is very important. Please keep that one in mind. On the left side, we also have a very important menu, which is called properties, but we also have different labels here. We have, for example, library, layers, planes, wizard, and stuff like that. But the most important menu on the left side is properties. We have settings for format, and we can also see information about the document and the project. And this kind of menu changes dynamically depending on the function you're choosing. So if I'm clicking on wall, you can see that the properties menu changes drastically. If I go ahead and I basically choose line, nothing really changes because the property menu already has the settings pre-opened that are relevant for the function line. So please keep in mind that a lot of settings can also be accessed through this kind of menu that you can see here. We also have a very important menu, something that is called Dialog line. And this kind of menu is very important in the process of working with Allplan, because this is a menu that also changes dynamically depending on the function that you're choosing. So let's go ahead, for example, and I choose something like wall. You can basically see in the dialog line what kind of input Allplan expects from you. So you can see I choose wall. You can see the function here. And we can now see that Allplan basically asks for the first point, which is called a from point. We will talk about it in a couple of seconds. But this is basically the menu overview that I wanted to give you. And this very big white space here is our drawing menu that we are having right here. So it kind of depends on your installation. Maybe your view is a little bit different. So maybe it looks like that. Don't worry, you can change it if you want to with this kind of menu, which is called window. So you basically have viewport, 1 viewport, 2 viewports, 2+1 animation view, which is what I clicked on right now. And you can keep it as you like, as long as you have a plan view, because this is crucial in the process. So please keep in mind, if you want to work with 1 window, this is perfectly fine. If you want to work with 2+1 animation window, this is also fine, as long as you're working in this kind of plan window. For this kind of tutorial, I would advise that we go ahead and choose 1 viewport. All right, so let's start right up with our first function that we want to learn. So you can follow me in real time with these kinds of steps. So please go ahead and go to the left side, Architecture, change the role to Draft. So let's go to Draft. And as soon as we clicked on Draft, we can see that the menu basically changed dynamically, as I showed earlier. And please take in mind and take care that the label Design is activated. And now we go into the menu 2D Objects. And the menu 2D Objects basically contains our function line. And this is what we are going to use now to make the very first construction from in Allplan. So choose line. And most functions in Allplan, as soon as you open them, will open another small menu that are only function related. And this one that popped up right here basically contains a very easy setting. So we have basically individual lines and polyline. So the polyline setting is what we want now. Maybe I want to show that one right here. So we always have a starting point and a finish point. And if I have the setting individual lines activated, I have the starting point, the end point, and that's it. And I can go ahead and I can draw more and more and more lines. If I activate polyline, which I really like and I've always activated, but this is just personal preference, I can go ahead and have the starting point, the end point, and then I can go ahead and make exactly a polyline. So the thing here is sometimes it happened that I input false values or I misclicked something, and this is where this small button comes in mind, where we can click on back. So we can basically go back and say, okay, I want to continue from this kind of line, and after that I can go ahead and basically continue to draw. So I deleted that really quick. So let's go together online. We have the polyline activated, and now we will start up with our first construction in Allplan itself. So let's take a look at our dialog line. As I told you earlier, so basically you activate one kind of option, and after that you basically always look at the dialog line, what kind of input is expected from you. So we are in the option line, and Allplan asks us first from a from point. So basically we have the X and Y coordinate, and we can input these kinds of coordinates. But we could also go ahead and basically do a click on our drawing space. So I'm doing a left click right now, and I basically defined the from point. And now we have the 2 point. So line 2 point, and now we can input coordinates. So we have delta X and delta Y. So if we go ahead and basically input a delta X coordinate, the grid from the coordinate input will basically start at the first point that we have defined. So if I input the value 5, the following happens. Of course, it goes 5 meters to the right. Why 5 meters? Because the length down here is set to meters. and this is the standard setting. So we could basically go ahead, delta x 5 meters, delta y 1 meter, and now we can see that Allplan basically walked from the first input, the from point, 5 meters to the right and 1 meters up. So most CHD systems work like that. And please keep in mind, there is also the track line. So you have to take care that you don't activate the track line by mistake. So basically, I want to demonstrate you very quickly what the track line is all about and why do we have to take care of it. So basically we have this kind of track line, and as soon as I activate the track line, for example here in the 45 degree angle, we can see that the dialog line on the bottom left changes drastically. So the symbols are changing and we no longer have x and y coordinates. We have basically a length and the other coordinate, which basically allows us to make a distance from the track line itself. And this highly depends on where you are right now. So if I choose different track lines, I get these kinds of results, which can come in really handy, but we don't need it right now. So please take care that you don't activate any kind of track line and that the setting is just as I showed you here. So as soon as we are satisfied with our input, we can basically go ahead and press enter. And this is the first line that we have drawn. We defined a from point and a to point. And because we've activated polyline, we can now go ahead and basically input another line which is related to the first line or connected to the first line. I also want to demonstrate something more about this. So basically let's input another set of coordinates. So delta x 1 meter, delta y 5 meter. So 1 meter to the right, 5 meters to the top. And we can also press enter as soon as we're satisfied. And now it gets kind of interesting. So we can also input negative coordinates, of course. So delta x minus 5 meters, delta y minus 1 meter. And we basically went the way back, but on a different starting point. So this is basically the next information I want to provide you, that you're also able to input negative values in these kinds of menus. And even further, you can also make a very simplified calculus in these kinds of menus. So I could go ahead, for example, I could input another value. I just want to demonstrate it to you. For example, -1. And now there stands -1 and -1. Again, so basically this is the result that we are already facing, which is basically -2 meters. So I could go ahead and could input the value +2, so nothing would change, or +3. This also works perfectly fine. I could also go ahead and say 2 times 5, which basically changes the value to 10 meters, or 2 divided by 5. So you can see, you can input a very simple calculus here as well. So please keep that in mind, because sometimes this has been needed. Okay, so, but we are also very satisfied with what we are having here. So we have delta x, delta y, -5 meters, -1 meter, enter, delta x -1, and delta y -5, and then we basically closed our figure. So pressing enter on that one. And we have finished the input of the lines. So what we can do now is basically go ahead and press escape once. And when we are pressing escape once, we are basically exiting the function, or at the input of the function, but we are still in the function. So as soon as we click escape another time, we exited the function as well. So you should keep that one in mind as well. And there is the next thing I want to show you that I already did. You can basically move this kind of view around when you click on your mouse wheel and hold it down. So this is something that most people don't know at the start. So click on your mouse wheel itself and drag the view around. This comes in really handy. And you can also use your mouse wheel to basically zoom in and zoom out. So this is a really good thing if you want to move in your drawing itself. So you basically, okay, I want to work on that kind of corner. Okay, that's one good, that's good. Let's go to the right. I have that corner. So this is perfectly fine. And there's also a function. There are 3 options to access this kind of functionality, which is a double click on the mouse wheel itself. So if I, for example, have a drawing and the view is just like that, and I want to basically use this kind of function, which is called zoom all, I could do a double click on my mouse wheel and basically have a zoom window that is focused on all elements that are in my current drawing. So please keep that one in mind. Double click on the mouse wheel itself. Another option would be just to press the button F5 on your keyboard. Or you could go ahead and just click on that button. All these 3 kinds of options basically doing the same thing, so don't worry. Okay, so we learned how to create a very easy 2D object that contains just 4 lines. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the right-hand side of the action bar that I mentioned earlier. So we have functions, for example, like change or edit, and I want to quickly show you what that's all about. So a very good function is stretching entities. So it already says it here in the description. You can use this tool to stretch 2D and 3D entities. So I'm clicking on that one. And now it gets interesting because we are basically looking into the way to activate different kinds of objects in Allplan itself. And just let's say we want to basically work with this point that we see here. When we go ahead and basically use this kind of function, when I hold my left mouse button down to activate this kind of point, I have 2 options. So from the right to the left, please keep that in mind. From the right to the left, it's blue. Just give me a second. So from the, So from the right to the left, it's green, and from the left to the right, it's blue. And it always depends a little bit on what kind of function you're in. So from the right to the left, it's green. From the left to the right, it's blue. And you can change these the selection up here with select elements based on direction. So you can basically say, okay, I only want select elements fully bounded, select elements fully bounded and intersected, or select elements based on direction. And the thing here is, if I go from the right to the left, I have the green field. So what basically happens with these kinds of lines, I have the upper line, the right line, and the bottom line. And all these kinds, as soon as I release the left mouse button, all these kinds of lines will be activated because the top, the bottom, and right are intersected or fully intersected by this kind of field. So you can see this one became red, this one became red, this one became red. Let's go ahead and do this opposite thing. So from the left to the right, I have the same marking as I just had before, but now only the lines can become activated that are completely inside this kind of field. And this is what I wanted to demonstrate to you. So if I go ahead, for example, with the stretching entities, I mark this kind of point, and I basically take a quick look at the stretch entities from points or enter dx. So basically I have to choose a point where I'm basically want to choose the path these kinds of entities should move. So I can click on this kind of button and I could go ahead and basically stretch these kinds of entities. So if I choose a different point from here, and I go ahead to the top right, you can see that it basically changes the view. I can interact with these kinds of points. So please keep that one in mind if you want to work with these kinds of entities. So the next thing I want to show you, and this is a very important feature that comes with Allplan and CHD drawing, is copy and paste. So basically choose copy and paste, and again, Allplan asks us in the dialog line, select elements you want to copy. And now the selection that we've talked about earlier comes in really handy. So if I go from the right to the left, I have the green field, and I can choose all the elements that are inside the field or partly intersected by the field. We also have to choose from, depending on the function, we are in the copy function right now, a from point. So let's basically go ahead, click on the bottom left corner of this kind of figure. Now we can see we defined the from point, and now we have to define a to point. And we could basically hover. So hovering is just a term I use if I want to tell you that this kind of function, or I'm using my cursor just to hover over this kind of point without clicking anything. Just put your cursor there, don't click anything, and you're good. So this is the term I'm using for hovering. So just hover over the from point, and now define the to point depending on the coordinate input. So basically we have delta x, and we could go ahead and basically input the value of 10 meters. So what happens is that it goes 10 meters to the right. And as soon as we are satisfied with the result, we can go ahead, press enter, and that's it. So we generated basically one copy, which is a good thing. But sometimes we want to copy more than one element, and we want to copy them in a grid. So this is what I wanted to show you as well. So let's go ahead and click on copy and paste again. And we are again selecting the elements that we want to copy. And then we are choosing the from point. So bottom left. And now we go ahead and we press the Alt key on our keyboard a couple of times. We go through delta X, delta Y, delta Z, and enter number of copies. So we basically are in the first field, and we input the value 10. And you can see as soon as you change the value and input any kinds of other value, you see that basically all the other menus are becoming grayish. So we input 10, and after that, Allplan asks us again about the to point. So we have delta X, and we input the coordinates of 10 meters and press enter. And now we can see on the right that we basically have these different kinds of figures copied in a grid, always 10 meters to the right, to the right, to the right. And we can also do this again in the other direction. So we're basically marking all these kinds of objects, bottom left, and then we input again the number of copies 10 times. We're pressing enter, and now we input the coordinates with delta Y, 10 meters, and press enter. And now we do a double click on our mouse wheel, and we can basically zoom into all these kinds of elements that we've just created. So this is a function that comes in really handy. And as soon as you understood how this function works, you can also use the move function, because it works exactly the same, apart from the part where you basically copied more than one element. But for example, if we use move, bottom left, we could go ahead and basically say, okay, move 2 point minus 10 meters, and the original will become will be deleted. So this is basically the same, more or less same function as copy. Besides that, the original will become deleted. Okay, so another thing that you will use a lot is the mirror function. So let's talk about the mirror function also really quickly. So basically, let's choose a mirror without copy function and click on this kind of very little arrow down here. And you can see that you can access more different mirror functions. So we have mirror without copy and the function copy and mirror. So please go ahead and click on copy and mirror. And again, Allplan asks us in the dialog line, copy and mirror, select the elements you want to mirror. Okay, let's go ahead. We want to mirror this kind of figure. And now it asks us, click point 1 of mirror axis or click mirror axis. So if we already would have a predefined mirror axis, we could use that one, but we're currently not having that. So what we can do is basically we hover again over the bottom left part, bottom left point of the figure, and we go ahead and basically input the value delta x minus 1. And what happens now, you can see it, I will zoom in so that you can see it a little bit better. A small red cross will pop up on the left side and is basically exactly 1 meter apart from the part we are currently hovering in. So this is the first point that we can define if we are hovering over another point. So basically, if we want our mirrored object to be exactly 2 meters apart from our original object, we could use this kinds of function and basically input the value of a fictional mirroring line that we're inputting right now, which sounds kind of complicated, but it really isn't as soon as you see it. So I inputted the first point for the mirror axis with minus 1 meter, and I click on enter. And now I have to find the first point, and I could go ahead, for example, and use the second point, which is up here. So we have basically also the option now to define the second point of our mirroring axis. And of course, the result depends on where your mirroring axis is. So if we go ahead and use the track line up here and just click a second time on the left, we basically have created our mirrored object. And we could also do that again, now a little bit quickly. So just go down 1 meter, just like that, use the track line, and you can see how easy it is to basically generate this kind of mirroring. Very good. So let's recap really quick. So we talked about the surface of Allplan. We talked about how to create different kinds of lines. We learned how to move in ourselves and our view in the drawing. And we learned something about the copy function, the move function, and also the mirror without copy function and the mirroring function itself. But there is more. There's a lot more. And I want to show you for this part of the tutorial also how we can use 2D areas and how we construct different kinds of things. So let's say, just to play around a little bit with the program, that we want to input a circle into this kind of figure. And the circle should be exactly in the middle of this kind of figure. So if you would have a paper in front of you and you want to work the circle in, what you would basically do is to use these lines, and then after that you would basically start to create your circle just like that. The good thing is in Allplan we don't need to construct 2D lines to basically generate points or something like that. This is really not needed for most of the constructions, because there are other functions that I want to show you really quick. So let's go ahead and select the circle. And if we want to create a circle, it highly depends on what you have set here. So we have basically circle based on center, circle based on 2 points, and circle based on 2 points and the radius or diameter. So these are the 3 options to input values and generate circles. So we could go ahead and basically say, okay, I want now my circle inside my figure, but how do I create the first point? And this is where the construction functions in Allplan come in really handy. So we can go ahead and basically, for example, choose this point, do a right click on it now. Important, do a right click, not left click. And then we have a menu which also contains a lot of construction functions. For example, point of intersection, midpoint, center of arc, division point, base of perpendicular, and so on and so on. So basically we have the function midpoint, and it always divides the way I traveled from the first point into half and generates it. So we could go ahead, for example, top left, bottom right, and now we basically generated the midpoint. So top left, bottom right, and now we do a left click, and as soon as we do a left click, we can see that the midpoint of the circle gets generated. We could also input now, for example, a radius of the circle. We could use our cursor to use the track line or something like that, or we could catch the point that is on the edge of our figure. So if I basically go ahead and I look into this kind of edge of the circle, we can see that Allplan already catches the point, and now we can see the radius is exactly what we want it to be. Okay, so this is a very good way to basically use this kind of function and to lock in certain points. And as soon as we are satisfied with the radius that we've created, we can do a left click. And because we have the enter and angle based on delta angle activated, we can now basically, choose a section from the circle. Or we could just click escape once, and now we have generated this kind of circle. So we have also learned that there are different construction functions that come in really handy. And I want to take it for this kind of tutorial a little bit further. So let's talk about 2D areas as well. So up here you can see the menu 2D areas. We have, for example, hatching, we have style area, we have bitmap area. We can convert also different surface elements. And we can basically also choose pattern or fill. The basis is it always works the same. So if we basically choose fill, for example, a lot of menus pop up. So we have the input options and related to the filling itself, the fill option. So we can go ahead and click here on properties. Just click on it. And now we basically have different options to select the RGB color, or we could just use a default color. So just go ahead and choose a color that you like. So for example, I would choose the 27. This is a light gray. I will click OK. And now it becomes interesting because I also have this kind of menu up here, which is about the input options. And the input options, for example, if we would choose the area detection, we could basically generate really quickly a filling that is exactly the size that we want to have in this kind of section of our figure. So keep in mind that this kind of area detection is activated, and now we do a left click in a closed area. So for example here. And you can see that this is being generated like immediately. So let's go ahead, choose a different kind of color, just like that, and choose even another one. And another one. And you can see with ease, I could basically generate these kinds of fillings that are exactly the size of the closed section. So if the section gets even more complicated, don't worry, area detection will come in really handy regarding this. So go ahead and maybe choose the red one, into the circle, press escape a couple of times. And now we have basically filled our closed areas with different kinds of colors. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was it for that part. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next part. Bye bye.